After 30 years of marriage, Helen Morgan thought she knew everything about her husband, until a forgotten letter revealed his shocking betrayal, a hidden second family, and a secret son. Ignored by her family even on her own birthday, Helen bravely confronted her husband's double life during a family dinner, causing their perfect world to collapse overnight. Instead of falling apart, Helen chose to rebuild her life, transforming heartbreak into strength, forgiveness, and ultimate freedom. Watch this powerful story about overcoming betrayal, rediscovering self-worth, and finding happiness after pain. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more empowering stories of resilience and hope. I never imagined the loneliest moment of my life would happen surrounded by my entire family. It was supposed to be a special day, my 60th birthday, but no one else seemed to remember. Or perhaps they simply chose to forget. We had gathered at my son Andrew's house, ostensibly to celebrate my grandson Michael's first day of school. The living room buzzed with energy, filled with bright balloons and a colorful cake decorated with a cheerful "Congrats, Michael!" There were cameras snapping, smiles glowing, and laughter echoing warmly off the walls. Yet amidst all the vibrant celebration, I felt utterly invisible. I sat quietly on the corner of the worn leather couch, one that had once belonged to George and me, watching the scene unfold like an outsider. My husband, George, stood proudly beside Andrew, patting him on the shoulder as if to say, "Look at the life we built." He didn't glance my way once, not even accidentally. It was a familiar neglect, one I'd learned to tolerate for years, like a dull ache that never completely faded. "Mom!" Andrew called suddenly, pulling my attention back. A flicker of hope rose in my chest. Perhaps he remembered? "Could you get us some plates from the kitchen?" I forced a smile. "Sure thing." As I stood up, Sarah, my daughter-in-law, brushed past me without even acknowledging my presence. Her perfume lingered in the air, sweet yet overpowering, almost as if masking something sour beneath. I moved quietly toward the kitchen, feeling each of my 60 years pressing heavily on my shoulders. In the cool solitude of the kitchen, my eyes caught sight of an old framed photograph on the wall. George and me on our wedding day. Young and hopeful, smiling effortlessly at the camera. Back then, George's eyes sparkled whenever they met mine, making me believe I was the center of his world. I gently touched the glass, tracing the outline of our youthful faces, wondering when exactly that sparkle had vanished. "Grandma!" Michael's excited voice startled me back to reality. He ran toward me, arms wide open, and for a brief moment, warmth filled my chest. At least someone noticed I was still here. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Do you know what today is?" he asked, grinning proudly. I knelt down to meet his bright eyes, hopeful yet guarded. "Tell me." "My first day of big school!" He bounced on his toes. "Daddy says it's the most important day ever." "It certainly is, sweetheart," I said softly, forcing cheer into my voice. "I'm very proud of you." He hugged me quickly, then dashed back into the living room, leaving behind only an echo of his joyful laughter. It hurt more deeply than I wanted to admit, how easily everyone else's milestones overshadowed my own. Feeling a bit lost, I wandered down the hallway toward the study, hoping to compose myself before returning. My eyes lingered on George's mahogany desk, cluttered with old books and scattered papers. As I absently straightened the mess, my hand brushed against something stiff hidden underneath a pile of letters, a sealed envelope yellowed at the edges, addressed in handwriting that seemed unsettlingly intimate. Curiosity and dread intertwined as I pulled the envelope free, heart thumping heavily against my ribs. I carefully slipped it open, my fingers trembling slightly as I unfolded the faded pages inside. Words leapt out, cruel and sharp. "George, our son Nathaniel keeps asking about you. I know this situation isn't ideal, but he deserves to know his father. Please call me, Linda." My stomach tightened violently, the room spinning around me. Nathaniel? Another son? My breath caught painfully in my throat as the realization crashed down. George had betrayed me, not just once, but for more than 3 decades. building an entirely different life parallel to ours. Clutching the letter, I steadied myself against the desk, feeling the solid wood beneath my fingertips as if it were the only thing anchoring me to reality. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not now, not here. I folded the letter carefully, returning it to its hiding place, knowing this discovery had irrevocably shifted my world. The laughter from the other room echoed down the hall, louder and clearer, mocking my quiet devastation. I inhaled deeply, straightening my spine, determination replacing shock. My family might overlook me today, but they wouldn't ignore me forever. Today marked more than just another year of my life. It was the day my old life ended, and something entirely new began. After placing the letter back, I stood frozen, the weight of betrayal pressing heavily in the quiet room. Sinking into George's old leather chair, I glanced numbly around the framed diplomas, dusty bookshelves, everything now a silent testimony to his deception. Memories surged uninvited. Our younger selves, George promising forever, me believing him wholeheartedly. Now each recollection carried a bitter taste, especially the unexplained absences, always smoothed over by wilted flowers and half-hearted apologies. I saw clearly now what I'd missed all these years. A parallel life he carefully hid just out of sight. A gentle knock startled me. Margaret stepped in, immediately sensing my distress. "Helen, are you all right?" I hesitated, but her comforting presence broke my silence. "George has another family. He has a son, Nathaniel. All these years, Margaret." Margaret gently took my trembling hand. "You trusted him. Don't blame yourself for his betrayal." "What am I supposed to do now?" I whispered. "You're stronger than you think," she reassured softly. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." Later, alone in our bedroom, I methodically packed a small bag, each carefully chosen item symbolizing a quiet reclaiming of myself. It was my first act of defiance, subtle but powerful. The truth couldn't remain hidden forever, but now neither would I. I chose a Friday evening to reveal the truth, a quiet autumn night, leaves rustling softly outside, the house bathed in a warm, deceptive glow. George had invited Andrew, Sarah, and Michael over for dinner, eager to celebrate another one of Michael's small achievements at school. As usual, no one asked my opinion. But tonight, I didn't mind. Tonight, I had my own purpose. Standing alone in the kitchen, I placed roasted potatoes and steaming green beans onto plates, movement steady and controlled despite my heart pounding violently beneath my chest. Voices from the dining room drifted toward me, cheerful yet oblivious, deepening my resolve. I allowed the scent of rosemary and garlic to soothe me, focusing briefly on the subtle comfort cooking had always provided. Finally, with the table perfectly set, I stepped into the dining room carrying the plates, calm and composed. George sat at the head, laughing loudly at something Andrew had said, his confidence filling the space. Sarah smiled politely, absorbed by her phone, while Michael played quietly beside her. "You've outdone yourself again, Helen," George praised absently, barely glancing my way. I set his plate down carefully, offering a faint smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Thank you." We ate in relative quiet, forks clinking softly, polite conversation filling the silence. I barely tasted the food, too busy rehearsing the words I'd chosen. When George began recounting another one of his embellished stories, comfortably basking in his self-created spotlight, I finally cleared my throat. The table fell quiet. "I have something important to share with all of you," I began, my voice steady but softer than I'd intended. Andrew paused, raising an eyebrow. "Is everything all right, Mom?" George's eyes met mine, suddenly wary, perhaps sensing the tension in my tone. "What's going on, Helen?" I inhaled deeply, gathering the last threads of courage. "I discovered something a few weeks ago, something I never imagined possible." I reached carefully into my pocket, retrieving Linda's letter. George's eyes widened as recognition flashed sharply across his face. "I found these letters, George," I continued quietly, placing them gently onto the table. "Letters about your other family, about Nathaniel, your other son." The silence that followed was deafening. Andrew's fork clattered onto his plate, his eyes darting rapidly between George and me. Sarah's phone slipped unnoticed from her grasp. Michael stared in quiet confusion, sensing the tension but too young to understand. George finally spoke, voice tight and guarded. "Helen, let's not—" "Don't deny it," I interrupted softly, a lifetime of suppressed dignity surfacing within me. "Nathaniel is 31, Andrew's age. You kept an entire life hidden from us all." Andrew's chair scraped harshly against the hardwood floor as he rose, visibly shaken. "Dad, is this true?" George's face turned pale beneath the glow of the dining room chandelier. For once, he had no practiced charm to fall back on. His eyes moved slowly around the table, landing finally on me, defeat evident. "I never wanted you to find out this way." "Then how did you want me to find out?" I asked sharply, emotions simmering beneath my carefully maintained composure. "Did you plan on keeping it secret forever? Nathaniel isn't the only one, is he? There's Linda and a grandchild." Andrew shook his head, eyes blazing with anger and hurt. "How could you do this to Mom? To all of us?" George sank back into his chair, all confidence drained. "It was never meant to hurt anyone. It just happened." I held his gaze steadily, unwilling to let him escape responsibility. "No, George, you chose to deceive us for decades. And Linda, she knew everything, didn't she? She even tried to keep me quiet, to manipulate my silence." George's startled look confirmed my suspicion. Andrew's jaw tightened. Sarah looked away, uncomfortable. The weight of revelation now hung thickly over the room, suffocating in its heaviness. George remained silent, eyes cast downward. Andrew turned toward me, anger quickly replaced by remorse. "Mom, how long have you known?" "Long enough," I answered quietly, my voice firm. "Long enough to know I deserve better than this." I stood slowly, chair scraping gently behind me. "I've packed my things. I'll be leaving tomorrow." George's eyes shot upward, panic flashing briefly. "Helen, let's talk." "We've talked enough," I interrupted firmly. "I've spent 30 years listening. Now it's time you faced your choices." Without waiting for another word, I stepped away from the table, leaving the letter lying exposed between them. Behind me, I heard Andrew's voice rise in disbelief, the muffled sound of George's protests. But my footsteps never slowed. For the first time, the chaos didn't break me. It lifted me, each step away a victory against a lifetime of quiet endurance. Stepping out onto the porch into the cool night air, I breathed deeply, savoring my newfound freedom. The truth was finally out, and while the pain lingered sharply, I was no longer bound to the silence. My life was mine again, unburdened and limitless. As I stepped outside into the cool autumn night, I paused on the porch, listening to the eruption of voices behind me. The sound was muffled yet piercing, the fierce anger in Andrew's voice mingled with George's defensive explanations. Sarah's gentle murmurs trying to calm the tension only made it clearer how fractured we'd become. For a moment, guilt pricked at my heart. This chaos was, after all set in motion by my revelation. But just as quickly, another truth surfaced inside me. This turmoil had always existed, hidden beneath a polished facade. I had merely stripped away the illusion. "Helen, wait!" George called sharply from the doorway, desperation clear in his voice. I turned slowly, watching him step out onto the porch. His face, illuminated softly by the porch light, was pale and haggard. All his familiar authority had vanished. He looked smaller now, fragile and human. "Let's not end things this way," he pleaded quietly. "Think about Andrew, Michael, our family." "Our family?" I echoed, my voice gentle but resolute. "George, you ended our family the moment you chose to build another one. I'm simply choosing honesty over comfort." He shook his head, eyes pleading. "I never meant to hurt you. Nathaniel was never part of the plan, it just happened." "That's the problem," I whispered. "You allowed life to just happen without ever considering the damage it caused. George lowered his gaze, shoulders slumping in defeat. Andrew stepped out suddenly, interrupting our conversation with raw intensity. "Dad, she's right," he said, anger still simmering beneath his voice. "All these years you lied to us. Mom deserved better. We all deserved better." Sarah stood behind Andrew, silently holding Michael close. Her eyes reflected sadness rather than anger, a quiet sympathy directed toward me. Michael stared at us with confused, innocent eyes, clutching a small stuffed rabbit to his chest, sensing that his world had shifted in ways he couldn't yet understand. George turned back to Andrew, voice cracking slightly. "I made mistakes. Terrible ones. But don't destroy everything we've built." "You destroyed it!" Andrew snapped, voice rising. "You destroyed it when you chose to lie for 30 years. Did you even think of Mom once?" "I tried to protect," George began weakly. "Protect yourself," Andrew interrupted, bitterness coating every word. "That's what you did." Watching Andrew confront his father, I felt both pride and profound sadness. My son was now forced to bear the pain I'd silently carried alone for weeks. As a mother, witnessing his hurt was more painful than anything George had ever done to me. "Andrew," I said gently, stepping forward, reaching for his arm. "I don't want hatred to define us." He turned toward me, frustration briefly crossing his face before softening. "Mom, you can't just forgive." "I'm not forgiving," I replied, firm but kind. "But carrying this anger won't heal us either. We deserve better. You deserve better." He sighed deeply, eyes filling with unshed tears. "I just can't believe he could hurt you like this." I squeezed his arm gently. "Neither could I, sweetheart. But now we know. And knowing is our first step forward." Andrew hugged me then, a sudden tight embrace that caught me off guard. I felt his silent tears dampen my shoulder, and my heart broke quietly, knowing how deeply George's betrayal had wounded us all. Stepping back from Andrew, I turned again to George, who watched helplessly from the side, a stranger in the very family he'd built. "I'll come for my things tomorrow. I think it's best you stay away while I do to." George said nothing, only nodding weakly in quiet surrender. Andrew wrapped an arm protectively around my shoulders as we walked toward the driveway. Behind us, I heard the soft murmurs of Sarah comforting Michael. The family that had once felt secure and unshakable now lay in fragments behind me, each piece jagged and sharp. Driving away into the silent night, the soft hum of the engine soothed my nerves. I didn't know exactly where I was headed yet, but for the first time, I felt the certainty of liberation stronger than fear. The chaos I'd left behind was painful, yet necessary, a truth I could no longer deny. As streetlights flashed past, illuminating the darkened interior of the car, I felt tears finally escape down my cheeks. Not tears of defeat, but of quiet relief grief mingled gently with hope, marking the end of the life I had known and the beginning of something entirely new. I settled into a small lakeside cottage near Margaret's home, modest and cozy, painted soft shades of cream and pastel blue. The morning after moving in, I stood silently on the wooden porch, a steaming mug of tea warming my palms, watching the gentle mist rise from the lake's calm surface. It felt strange at first, this solitude, a quietness so profound it seemed tangible. Yet beneath the unfamiliarity lay a peacefulness I had long forgotten existed. In those first days alone, I allowed myself to rediscover simple joys, sipping tea slowly, listening to birdsong at sunrise, and leisurely tending to a small garden behind the cottage. Each tiny act felt like reclaiming parts of myself that had quietly slipped away over the years. I planted lavender, rosemary, and thyme, breathing deeply as their earthy fragrance wrapped gently around me, comforting and grounding. Mornings were spent in peaceful reflection, afternoons in long walks along the lakeshore, the rhythmic sound of water lapping against pebbles guiding me into tranquility. My evenings were devoted to reading and rediscovering old passions, I enrolled in a local watercolor painting class, something I had long desired yet always postponed, believing that others' needs were more urgent than my own dreams. In class, I hesitated at first, unsure of myself among younger, more experienced artists. But gradually, brushstroke by tentative brushstroke, I began to gain confidence. One afternoon, Margaret stopped by unexpectedly, smiling warmly when she saw my newest painting drying on the easel. "You have a real gift, Helen," she said softly, genuinely impressed. I blushed lightly, feeling pride I hadn't experienced in years. "I'm still learning." "Aren't we all?" Margaret replied gently, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. "But seeing you here, finally living your own dreams, I've never been happier for you." Her words lingered with me, reminding me daily that it wasn't selfish to put myself first. It was healing, necessary. Gradually, people in the small community began to notice the quiet woman living alone by the lake. The woman who seemed content simply being herself. Neighbors began greeting me warmly, occasionally stopping to chat. They didn't know the details of my past, but their kindness and acceptance filled a void I hadn't realized existed. One afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Andrew. "Mom," he began hesitantly, voice quiet, I'd like to come visit. We need to talk." I agreed immediately, surprised but hopeful. A few days later, we sat together on my porch, overlooking the lake, the sun casting soft reflections upon the water. Andrew broke the silence first. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said earnestly, "for not seeing everything you went through, for making you feel invisible all these years." I reached over, squeezing his hand gently. "Andrew, I don't blame you for any of that. We both were caught in your father's shadow. But maybe now, together, we can step out of it." He nodded, tears glistening faintly in his eyes. "How do you do it, Mom? How do you forgive and move forward?" I considered his question, breathing in deeply, savoring the fresh lakeside air. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," I explained slowly, thoughtfully. "It's simply choosing not to carry the pain anymore." Andrew stayed late into the evening. We talked quietly about his childhood, the happier memories I still cherished, and the dreams we both still held for the future. As he hugged me goodbye, I felt the warmth of true reconciliation, knowing our bond had strengthened, not weakened by our shared grief. After he left, I remained on the porch, watching twilight gently envelop the lake, a soft palette of oranges and purples painting the sky. Peace settled around me, quiet but undeniable, and I realized fully that this newfound life wasn't just an escape, it was my rebirth. Andrew began visiting more frequently after our initial conversation, each visit gradually closing the distance created by years of quiet misunderstanding. Often we sat side by side on the porch overlooking the serene lake, sharing stories and memories we'd buried too long beneath everyday routines. One cool autumn afternoon, as golden leaves drifted gently down, Andrew sipped his coffee slowly and glanced toward me, his expression carefully guarded. "Have you talked to Dad at all?" he asked quietly, breaking a peaceful silence. I shook my head calmly. "Not since everything happened." Andrew sighed deeply, leaning back into his chair, eyes thoughtful. "He wants to reach out, but he doesn't know how. He asks about you constantly, almost obsessively." I considered this carefully, noting the sadness and confusion in Andrew's voice. "Your father spent decades choosing silence," I finally replied, my voice gentle yet firm. "If he wants forgiveness, he needs to find his own words this time." Andrew nodded slowly, his gaze distant, lost in thought. "I feel trapped, Mom. He's still my father, but I can't forget how deeply he betrayed us." I reached over, gently resting my hand on his. "Andrew, loving someone doesn't mean you condone their actions. It's okay to feel conflicted. Healing doesn't happen overnight." He squeezed my hand gratefully, his expression softening slightly. "How do you do it? How do you keep moving forward without bitterness?" I smiled faintly, considering his question carefully. Bitterness would only chain me to the past. Forgiveness means releasing that chain and allowing myself to move forward. I've learned that freedom comes from within, not from the actions of others. Andrew absorbed my words quietly, eyes thoughtful. Gradually, his visits became more relaxed, the tension visibly easing from his shoulders with each heartfelt conversation we shared. Eventually, he began bringing Michael along to visit, restoring warmth and joy to our small cottage. Michael's laughter became a sweet soundtrack, innocent and healing, reminding us both of life's simple joys. One evening, as Andrew prepared to leave, he hesitated at the doorway, turning back toward me, eyes earnest and clear. "I want you to know something, Mom. Your strength watching you rebuild your life has taught me more than you could ever imagine. I admire you deeply. You inspire me." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, warmth blossoming inside my chest. "Hearing that means everything to me, sweetheart." He stepped closer, hugging me gently yet tightly, and for a moment, I felt all the pieces finally click back into place. We had survived the storm, and now we were building something stronger from the broken fragments left behind. As Andrew's car pulled away down the quiet road, I stood on the porch watching until the lights faded gently into darkness. Turning back toward my cottage, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Our family might never again look the way it once had, but the bonds we were forging now, built on honesty, forgiveness, and mutual respect, felt deeper, stronger, and infinitely more real. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely hopeful, not just for myself, but for Andrew and Michael too. We had found each other again, reconnecting through the difficult yet rewarding work of true reconciliation. As months passed, life at the lakeside cottage gradually took on a gentle rhythm that felt comforting and familiar. Without fully realizing it, I'd become part of the small community that surrounded me. Neighbors often stopped by my garden, complimenting the fragrant herbs and colorful flowers blooming vibrantly along the path leading up to my door. One crisp Saturday morning, as I trimmed lavender bushes near my gate, I noticed Margaret approaching, accompanied by two women I hadn't met before. "Helen," Margaret greeted warmly, smiling as she introduced her companions. "This is Anne and Julia. They've heard a lot about you." "Oh," I raised an eyebrow, mildly surprised. Anne, a friendly-looking woman in her late 50s with kind, intelligent eyes, smiled shyly. "Margaret mentioned you found the courage to start over, even after your life took an unexpected turn. I hope it's okay. We were inspired by your story." Julia nodded enthusiastically. "We're from the local women's center. We hold monthly gatherings to share experiences and offer support to women going through difficult transitions. We'd be honored if you would consider speaking sometime." Initially, I hesitated, instinctively wary of spotlight and attention. But looking into their hopeful faces, I realized this was exactly the kind of purpose my new life needed. Not hiding quietly behind old wounds, but gently guiding others forward. "I would be delighted," I replied softly, a warm feeling blossoming in my chest. "Though I'm not sure how inspiring my story really is." "You might be surprised," Anne smiled knowingly. A few weeks later, I stood in a cozy, warmly lit room at the Women's Center, heart fluttering nervously as I faced a small group seated in comfortable chairs. Faces of women, young and old, looked back at me with anticipation, their eyes filled with quiet strength and vulnerability that mirrored my own journey. I took a deep breath, steadied my nerves, and began simply with honesty. "My name is Helen," I said softly, "and for most of my life I defined myself solely by the roles I played: wife, mother, grandmother. But not long ago, my world unraveled when I discovered deep betrayal. Secrets kept for decades by the person I trusted most." A respectful silence filled the room as I continued, words flowing more naturally as confidence grew. I thought it was the end, but it turned out to be my beginning. The pain didn't defeat me, it freed me. It taught me something invaluable. Our worth isn't defined by the people around us or their choices. It comes from within, from choosing to rise above the hurt, to forgive, not because someone else deserves it, but because we deserve peace. As I spoke, I saw tears glisten quietly in some eyes, subtle nods of understanding and agreement around the room. Something powerful happened in that shared moment, something beautiful and healing, not just for them, but for myself as well. From that day on, I became a regular presence at the center, hosting small gatherings, gentle discussions over tea about strength, resilience, and renewal. Over time, these meetings grew in popularity, quietly transforming into a supportive network built on shared courage and hope. One evening, Andrew stopped by, finding me carefully preparing notes for the next gathering. "You've become quite the local celebrity," he teased gently, a proud smile lighting his face. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Hardly. I just share my truth and listen to others. That's all." Andrew's expression softened as he approached me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You might not see it clearly yet, Mom, but you're making a difference. Your story, your strength, is giving people hope." I looked up at him, deeply touched by his sincerity. "I just hope you know how grateful I am that you supported my choice to start again." He hugged me warmly, a comforting embrace that spoke more clearly than words ever could. "I've never been more proud of you. And Dad, well, he's finally beginning to understand the gravity of what he lost." I considered his words, realizing how little George now occupied my thoughts. The bitterness had quietly faded, leaving behind only gentle acceptance and peace. After Andrew left, I walked down to the lake, watching the sun set slowly, painting the sky with warm hues of gold, amber, and lavender. Breathing deeply, I smiled softly to myself, feeling utterly content. I'd once believed betrayal would break me, but it had only shaped me into a stronger, wiser, and gentler version of myself. I wasn't merely surviving anymore. I was thriving, fully awake, fully alive. In the soft twilight, I felt profound gratitude for the life I'd chosen to build from ashes. Tomorrow, I'd continue sharing my story, gently encouraging others on their own journeys toward healing and freedom. But tonight, standing quietly by the peaceful water, I felt completely at ease, finally living my truth, finally, beautifully free. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel.